Harris filling in from McGraw. David, let's bring up County Chief Police John Belmar.
And I wanted to have Chief McCall with
He's talking about the shooting in Berkeley last night.
And answer any of the questions on this. Chief, the city of Berkeley will have a 9 a.m. press conference, just so you know about that. First and foremost, I'd like to offer my condolences to the family of the deceased. These are nothing but tragedies. This is a family right now that, regardless of the decisions that this individual made, are without a family member at this Christmas season. This is also a tragedy for the police officer. You know, he will carry the weight of this for the rest of his life, certainly the rest of his career. So there are no winners here. There are nothing but losers. And I think this is really underscores the task that our police officers across the nation have to deal with day in and day out as they answer those calls for our community. At about 11:15 yesterday evening, a Berkeley officer who's about a 6-year veteran of the Berkeley Police Department, operating a marked car in full uniform, responded to a call for a larceny, that's a stealing, to the Mobile on the Run in the 6800 block of Hanley Road in the city of Berkeley. The officer encountered two individuals at the time on the south side of the Mobile on the Run there in the 6800 block. One of those individuals we're going to determine later, was armed with a pistol. But at the time, the officer didn't know that. He had a flashlight in his left hand. He called one of the individuals over who stood toward the grill of the officer's police car. The other individual came over toward the driver's side of the police car. The officer was talking to both of them. The individual that is going to have the firearm, he backed away to the east just for a few steps, turned back around. The officer started engaging him in conversation again, and then the individual produced a pistol with his arm straight out, pointing at the officer from kind of across the hood of the police car. At that point, the officer produced his service weapon and fired what we think at this point is 3 shots. He did this, if you watch the video, and you'll get a chance to see this, the officer, when he's encountered with the pistol, he begins to very, very quickly, rapidly move backwards. He eventually loses his balance and falls backwards, throws his flashlight, loses that, but he does get 3 rounds off. We feel like, and I don't know everything yet, you need to understand that. The medical examiner is still conducting their investigation. But we feel like that 1 shot struck the suspect, 1 shot struck the tire of the police car, and we can't account for the 3rd round. And I do think that it appears that 3 rounds were fired from the officer's weapon. There could turn out to be more than 3 that were shot, but that's what we think at the time. We do not believe that there was any shots fired from the suspect. The suspect was armed with a 9mm high point. It had a defaced serial number. It had 5 rounds in the chamber and 1 round in the magazine. The officer retreated to the west behind some gas pumps. He waited for an assist car to arrive before he approached the suspect again. Berkeley EMS responded to the scene. They were able to examine the suspect, and the 18-year-old male was in fact pronounced by the EMS crew there. Chief McCall, being apprised of the situation, made a notification to St. Louis County Communications, Task Crimes Against Persons, to investigate this. Crimes Against Persons got the call at about 11:45 last night. They arrived about approximately 12:15 in the morning, and they began to conduct their investigation. We were able to partition this young man's body off so nobody could see it while we were working the scene, and we were able to transport him approximately 1:30 to 1:40 hours this morning. It should be noted that we did seize video from the Mobile on the Run station. They have several cameras there. I have a still footage, and I'll show you here in a minute some of that video, and you're obviously going to be sent that. We also have at least 2 witnesses that saw this incident happen too. I talked a little bit about the fact that the individual, the decedent, had another individual with him. That is a person of interest in our case that we want to talk to. There's some video footage of him that I would like you guys to show, if you could, in your media, to see if we could identify this person. I think he's going to be important to talk to. Again, there are 2 other witnesses that were on the parking lot at the time that we have talked to. I spoke with Mr. McCullough this morning at about 3:30. I apprised him of the circumstances as we knew them at that point regarding the investigation. He has assigned a prosecutor to the case. I have since talked to Mr. McCullough and have briefed him further on the case at this point in time. I'll answer some questions here in a minute regarding the investigation into the shooting, but we had about 200 to 300 people, a crowd of about 200 to 300 people gathered at the 6800 block of Hanley. And I think one of the issues that we encountered is not too unfamiliar, but I think it's relatively new. We've seen this since Ferguson, but I've been around these investigations a long time to where we see crowds gather, but we don't necessarily see the assaults against the police officers and different things like this. In this case, unfortunately, we had several bricks thrown at officers, and we had 3 explosive devices that were used. 2 explosive devices were used on the parking lot of the Mobile on the Run. There's video of that many of you have perhaps already seen. If you haven't, we'll release that also. I'm guessing that these turned out to be some sort of an amalgam of fireworks or something like that were packaged up and lit. When you see the explosion on the Mobile on the Run, it's disturbing as it happens directly next to a gas pump. So, you really don't know that. A Florissant officer was injured trying to get away from that explosive. He's in the emergency room right now at a local hospital. I think he's dealing with some lower leg injuries from trying to get away from that. There was another one on the parking lot of the Mobile on the Run, and a third at the QT across the street, which I think started a small fire that we were able to, or somebody was able to extinguish at some point. So that's pretty disturbing. You talk about explosive devices, those are felonies. We would be very interested in finding out who did that, because we can't have a situation to where we have a crowd that gathers, which is certainly something that is understandable, but to come there armed with explosive devices is certainly something that is not safe for our community, not safe for our businesses, certainly not safe for our police officers. We had a St. Anne officer that was injured with a brick. He's been released from the emergency room with facial abrasions. There were 4 arrests made by the Berkeley Police Department. Those arrests were for assaults against police officers. I think some of that might have been captured in one of the media here today. And I'd like to underscore, because we've seen this already on social media today, about the police and throwing distraction devices, flashbangs, what have you, tear gas. We did not deploy tear gas. We did not deploy flashbangs. No officers down there did that. I had an opportunity to talk to several young people when I was down there this morning, and some of the conversation that we had was, well, why don't police officers use tasers, and why couldn't the officer use the taser, and why couldn't the officer use pepper mace instead of using a firearm? Well, really, frankly, that's unreasonable. When we have somebody that's pointing a gun at a police officer, there's not a lot of time. I would imagine that most of us would feel like we were in imminent danger of losing our lives at that point. And I think the officer responded with what he thought was commensurate force at the time. I understand the sentiment, and I understand the emotions, and I understand these young people are looking for something. But I think we need to understand the context of what happens down there with these kind of situations. I'd also like to point out that unfortunately, like I said, this is a tragedy for everybody, and our hearts certainly go out to the family of the decedent's family. But bad choices were made. We didn't have the opportunity. This individual could have complied with the officer. He could have ran away. He could have dropped the gun. All sorts of things couldn't happen. It didn't have to end with him approaching the officer with an arm extended and a 9mm pistol in his hand. So I think we need to understand those things at the same time. As far as what we do what we do. We investigate the facts, the circumstances. We present the evidence to the prosecuting attorney's office at some point later on down the line, and it'll be up to Mr. McCullough's office to figure out what he wants to do with the case beyond that point. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Can you speak to the race of both the officer and the...
So the suspect is 18 years old. I'm not going to release his name today because I'm a little concerned that not all of the extended family has been notified yet. The officer, as I said, is about a 6-year veteran of the Berkeley Police Department, and he is a white male.
As
Yes,
far
sir.
as the
Go ahead.
What is the age of the officer?
34.
As far as the original call for why the police officer came there, can you explain that a little bit more?
Stealing, and I don't know more than that. It was
Okay,
a call
David,
for
after this
stealing.
answer, I'll take it.
I'm assuming the genesis of that was from the Mobile on the Run station, but I don't really know more than that. Now, we're checking some CAD records to confirm that.
And were these two...
That is St. Louis County Police Chief John Belmar. A press conference about last night's incident in Berkeley about 11:15 at the Mobile on the Run when an 18-year-old black male was shot by a police officer from the Berkeley PD who was responding to what they called a routine business check. That was what we originally were told, but now we're being told that there was somebody had stolen something from that scene, and the cops have been called, and so this officer showed up, and when the 18-year-old kid pulled a Glock 9mm and pointed it at the officer responded by firing 3 shots. One of those was fatal to the 18-year-old. Then there were a bunch of people who showed up in the crowd after all the police cars showed up from all sorts of different jurisdictions in the area, and a crowd of about 300 at some point were there about 1:30, 2 o'clock this morning. There were bricks thrown by a couple of people in the crowd, and as you heard Chief Belmar say, 2 explosive devices were thrown. One was a very large flash bang something or other. The police say that they did not set any of that off or use any tear gas, and Chief Belmar said not too bright to use explosive devices at a gas station. There was also a looting incident that took place across the street on the other side of Hanley at a Quick Trip, which had closed when this incident took place at the Mobile on the Run across the street. The QT closed down, and still some looters got in there and got some lighter fluid and lit the magazine rack on fire and a trash can. Those fires were put out, and there was no major damage done to the QT. There was some damage done to a Hazelwood patrol car by some of the people who showed up later on. The rear window of that was broken, and Chief Belmar says there were 4 arrests by the Berkeley PD as the overnight progressed. That's the latest we have on that story for you at 7:18 on this Christmas Eve morning. I'm Paul Harris from McGraw, live in the morning on the Big 550